Thanks for the upgrade, my dear, Ethan joked as he strutted into the living room, tossing his sunglasses onto the coffee table. He stood there acting ridiculously proud of himself. Tailored suit, shiny new shoes, and luggage covered in luxury brand logos. First class to Europe, five-star hotels. This is the life I've been missing, Sarah, he declared. I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. What's so funny? He snapped, his smile dropping into a frown. Oh, Ethan, I said, shaking my head. You have absolutely no idea what you've done. My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old and I work in cybersecurity. For the past 7 years, I've been married to a man who turned out to be one giant red flag wrapped in charm. Ethan was always the smooth talker, the dreamer, the guy who made every half-formed idea sound like a great plan. Meanwhile, I was the one actually keeping our lives stable, holding down a real career while he jumped from one unrealistic scheme to another. I ignored the signs, the strange secrecy around money, the excuses for why he wasn't earning anything. I wanted to believe we were a team, even when we clearly weren't. But around 2 a.m. last week, Ethan made a mistake he couldn't talk his way out of. I was asleep upstairs when he did it. He must have waited until he was sure I was completely out before sneaking down to my laptop. Because of my cybersecurity work, I'm always alert to suspicious behavior, but I never expected I'd need those instincts in my own home. That night, Ethan used my laptop to get into one of my credit cards. He copied the information, took pictures of the details with his phone, and then crept back into bed pretending nothing had happened. The next morning, while I was drinking my coffee, I opened my phone to dozens of alerts. When I checked my banking app, I saw nearly $50,000 in charges, designer clothes, expensive watches, first-class tickets to Paris. My stomach dropped as everything lined up perfectly. Of course, Ethan was behind it. But instead of freaking out, I actually smiled. The card he used wasn't a personal card at all. It was a dummy credit card connected to a training program I manage at work. It's built specifically for fraud detection practice. Every single transaction sends an automatic alert straight to law enforcement. Ethan had no idea he had just turned himself into a live case study. I called my attorney, Chloe, that same morning. You're not going to believe this, I said, walking her through every detail. She didn't even try to hide her laughter. Wait. Let me get this straight. She what? Chloe said between chuckles. He stole a dummy card? The one connected to the fraud detection system? Exactly, I replied, keeping my voice steady but unable to hide the satisfaction underneath. I don't think he had a clue what he was doing. He probably thought he was being clever. Clever? Chloe snorted. He's a walking disaster. Every single charge he makes is going to be flagged. Have the authorities contacted you yet? Not yet, I said, but it's only a matter of time. For the rest of the week, I kept quiet, wanting to see just how far Ethan would take this. A couple of days later, he left a note on the kitchen counter. Taking some time for myself. Don't wait up. I knew exactly what that meant. He was out there enjoying life on what he thought was my stolen money. Every night, I sat on the couch and watched the fraud alerts pour in. Luxury restaurants, five-star hotels, ridiculous shopping sprees. Each notification felt like a tiny victory. 3 days into his little adventure, my phone rang. It was Agent Keller, a federal investigator assigned to the case. We've identified significant fraudulent activity tied to your account, he said. Do you know who might be responsible? Yes, I answered without a moment of hesitation. My husband? I said. There was a brief pause on the other end. Your husband? I walked Agent Keller through everything, including the fact that the card was part of a cybersecurity training program. He let out a low whistle. Well, that's a new one, he said. You'll need to give a formal statement, but based on what we've already flagged, he's in serious trouble. By the time Ethan finally came home, Overflowing with confidence after a week of blowing money he never earned, I was more than ready. He strutted into the living room like he owned the world, wearing the evidence of his little adventure, from the designer clothes to the expensive accessories. "Thanks for the upgrade," he said with that smug grin. "You really outdid yourself this time." I couldn't hold back the laughter that burst out. Ethan's smile faded. He clearly expected me to be angry. "What's so funny?" he snapped. "Oh, Ethan," I said, shaking my head. "You're about to find out." He dropped his designer duffel bag onto the floor with an arrogant thud. Then he slipped off his tailored jacket and hung it over the couch like he was settling into a luxury suite. "Seriously though, Sarah," he continued, "you should have told me about that card ages ago. Imagine how much fun we could have had." I leaned against the counter, arms folded. "And how exactly did you think this was going to end?" He smirked, kicking off his shoes. "You're always so uptight about money. It's not like you couldn't afford it. I figured you'd get over it once you saw how happy it made me." His confidence would have been insulting if it wasn't so laughable. I swallowed a laugh, knowing every word out of his mouth only made the case stronger. "So the watches, the flights, the hotels, you actually thought all of that was a gift from me?" "Not thought," he said proudly, pointing at himself. "Knew. It's about time you loosened up." I smiled, a small, tight smile that gave nothing away. "I'll bet," I said. Once Ethan went into the shower humming some annoying tune like he was on vacation instead of standing on the edge of his own downfall, I picked up my phone. I texted Chloe. "He's back. Ready to move forward." Her response came instantly. "Perfect. I'll notify Agent Keller." For the past week, Chloe and Agent Keller had been building the case. Every charge, every step Ethan took, had been tracked. From the designer stores to the luxury hotels in Paris, his spending spree painted the picture of a man who believed he was untouchable. Ethan had no idea how deep he was already in. He dug his own grave. Agent Keller had told me earlier that the fraud alerts from the dummy account had already triggered a full investigation. "We'll bring him in for questioning once you're ready," he'd said during our last call. But honestly, I'd let him walk right into it. The more confident he is, the better. So now, as Ethan's off-key singing echoed from the bathroom, a strange calm settled over me. For years, I had let him take advantage of my trust, my patience, and the stability I provided. But this time, he was about to learn exactly who he underestimated. When Ethan finally stepped out of the bathroom wrapped in a plush towel, still grinning like nothing could touch him, he flopped onto the couch. "You should have seen Paris," he bragged, reaching into his bag and pulling out a shiny gold watch. "The shops, the restaurants. It was like a dream." "Sounds amazing," I said from the doorway. "Go on." And he did. He launched into a long, animated recap of his week. A whole performance, complete with hand gestures and unnecessary stories about champagne at some rooftop bar. Every sentence he spoke sounded like a confession he didn't realize he was giving. He had no clue I was recording the entire conversation on my phone, ready to forward straight to Agent Keller. "And the best part?" Ethan said, admiring his watch. "Nobody suspected a thing. Not even you." The next morning, Chloe and I met for coffee to finalize the timeline. "He has no defense," she said as she scrolled through all the evidence. "The fraud alerts, the charges, last night's recording. It's airtight. Keller is ready to bring him in. The local police are already coordinating the arrest." I nodded, finally feeling the full weight of everything. "What happens after that?" "He'll face multiple charges: fraud, identity theft, unauthorized use of a financial account," Chloe said. "With the amount he spent, this won't be a slap on the wrist. Best case, he takes a plea deal and avoids jail. Worst case, he's looking at years." A small part of me wanted to feel sorry for him. But then I remembered the smug smile, the bragging, The way he paraded around with stolen luxury items without a care in the world. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was a long pattern of selfishness and entitlement I had ignored for far too long. Later that evening, while Ethan lounged on the couch scrolling through his phone, I heard a firm knock at the door. My heart jumped, not with fear, but with anticipation. I opened the door to find Agent Keller and two uniformed officers standing on the porch. "Good evening, Miss Miller," Keller said, polite but steady. "Is Ethan home?" "He's right inside," I replied, stepping aside. "Come on in." Ethan looked up, confused. "What's going on?" he asked, sitting up straighter. Agent Keller approached with a calm authority that seemed to shrink the room. "Ethan Miller, you're under investigation for multiple counts of credit card fraud and unauthorized use of financial accounts. We'd like you to come with us for questioning." Ethan's face drained of color. His confidence vanished instantly. "What?" No, this is a mistake," he stammered. He turned to me, desperate. "Sarah, tell them. This is crazy." I crossed my arms and tilted my head slightly. "I don't know, Ethan. You've been pretty busy lately. Maybe you should explain it to them." As the officers read him his rights and guided him toward the door, Ethan kept protesting. "You can't do this, Sarah. This is a setup. You're my wife. You're supposed to stand by me." "Funny," I said, leaning in the doorway. "I always thought husbands weren't supposed to steal from their wives. Guess we're both learning something today." Ethan glared at me, the desperation overtaking his usual arrogance. "You won't get away with this." I smiled. "Oh, Ethan. I already have." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving the living room strangely quiet. I stood there, staring at the spot where he had been just moments ago. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from the weight of what had finally happened. He was gone. Really gone. But it wasn't over yet. About an hour later, my phone rang. It was Chloe. "He's with Agent Keller now," she said, her voice steady. "They've started questioning him. From what Keller told me, Ethan is already trying to twist the story in his favor." "Of course he is," I said, rolling my eyes. "Let me guess. He's playing the victim." "Spot on," Chloe replied with a dry laugh. "He's claiming you gave him permission to use the card," Chloe said, still sounding irritated on my behalf. "But don't worry. With the fraud alerts, the charges, and your recording, he doesn't stand a chance." The next morning, Agent Keller called with an update. "We've got everything we need," he said. "Your husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, admitted to using the card. But now he's insisting he didn't realize it was connected to a fraud detection program. He's trying to shift the blame onto you." "That sounds exactly like him," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "So what happens next?" "We're moving forward with the charges," Keller said. "He's facing multiple counts of fraud and unauthorized use of a financial account. With the amount of money he spent, he's looking at serious consequences. The buyer protection programs flagged the luxury purchases, so those are being reimbursed. You're not responsible for a cent." The relief hit me instantly. For days, I'd been carrying the weight of Ethan's mess, terrified he might somehow twist his way out of it. But hearing the certainty in Keller's voice made everything sink in. "Thank you," I said softly. "For everything." "Don't thank me," Keller replied. "This case practically solved itself. You handled it exactly right." The fallout hit Ethan much harder than I expected. Word spread fast among our friends and acquaintances. His polished image, the charming, carefree husband, fell apart almost overnight. Nicole, the woman I'd always suspected he was seeing on the side, dumped him the second she heard about the charges. The designer items he'd bragged about were confiscated. His booked flights were canceled. The banks froze his accounts. His little world collapsed in on itself. One evening, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Sarah, Ethan said, his voice low and worn. I I need to talk to you. I actually laughed. Ethan, the only thing you need to do is figure out what you're going to say to the judge. Please, he said, his voice breaking into desperation. I messed up, okay? I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just what? I cut in, my tone cold. Just trying to steal $50,000 from me? Just hoping I wouldn't catch on? Just counting on me being too blind or too forgiving to stop you? Silence. A long, heavy silence. Finally, he whispered, I thought you loved me. I let out a sharp breath, anger burning through me. I did, Ethan. I loved the person I believed you were, but the man who stole from me, lied to me, and thought he could do it without consequences, that's not someone I could ever love. Before he could say another word, I hung up. A week later, Chloe called. He took a plea deal, she said. He's avoiding jail time, but he has to pay back every cent he tried to steal and complete community service, and his credit is going to be a disaster for years. That sounds fair, I replied. I said he always wanted the high life, I told Chloe. Now he gets to see how the other half lives. Chloe burst out laughing. You're handling this way better than most people would. It's funny, I said, smiling a little to myself. For years, I thought Ethan was the one keeping our marriage together. I thought his charm, his ambition, his big ideas, all of that was what kept us moving forward. But now I see the truth. I was the one carrying everything. He was just dead weight. The day the divorce papers were finalized, I poured myself a glass of wine and sank onto the couch, looking around the apartment that now felt fully and completely mine. Ethan's absence didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a gift. A chance to rebuild without the constant drain of his selfishness hanging over me. As I took a sip, I thought back to the moment he'd strutted through the door flaunting his stolen shopping spree, acting like he was doing me a favor by upgrading his lifestyle. He'd been so sure of himself then, so convinced of his own brilliance. And now, he was the one paying for it. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely free. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the start of a life I could finally shape on my own terms. In the days after his arrest, the apartment felt strangely quiet. His belongings were gone. What little he hadn't sold or stuffed into that designer duffel bag. But the space felt lighter. Almost as if the weight of his betrayal had been physically lifted. I could sit in my home without feeling his shadow hovering over me. One afternoon, Chloe stopped by to drop off the last bit of paperwork. How are you holding up? She asked, settling onto the couch with her usual no-nonsense attitude. Better than I expected, I admitted, handing her a cup of coffee. It's strange, but I'm not even angry anymore, just relieved. She gave me a knowing smile. That's because you already won. You didn't just survive this, Sarah. You came out stronger. I let that sink in as we went through the documents detailing Ethan's financial restitution. It wasn't just about the money. Even though knowing he'd be paying back every cent was incredibly satisfying, it was about finally reclaiming my independence. For years, I'd let Ethan set the tone of our relationship because it was easier to keep the peace. But now I understood something important. Peace built on silence and compromise isn't peace at all. A week later, the official letter confirming the divorce arrived in a plain envelope, far too small for something that marked such a monumental change. I held the envelope for a moment, letting the weight of it sink in before I finally tore it open. My eyes moved over the long lines of legal language until I found the only words that truly mattered to me, finalized and irrevocable. I sat down at the kitchen table, the letter still in my hands, and allowed myself a rare moment to just breathe. This wasn't the future I imagined when I married Ethan. Back then, I pictured stability, real partnership, and a life built on mutual trust. But as I looked around the home I had slowly rebuilt, I realized I had ended up with something far better: freedom, clarity, and proof that I was stronger than I ever believed. That evening, Lauren showed up with a bottle of wine and a carton of my favorite takeout. "To new beginnings," she said, lifting her glass, "and to the absolute dumpster fire you just walked away from." I burst out laughing and clinked my glass against hers. "To never settling for less than I deserve." Over the next few weeks, I began shaping what my new life would look like. I redecorated the apartment, adding color and little personal touches that felt like me for the first time in years. I even took the solo vacation I'd been quietly dreaming about for so long, traveling along the coast, exploring new places, and soaking in the kind of peace you only get when you step completely away from everything you've known. Ethan tried to reach out a few more times, messages sent through mutual acquaintances, vague apology emails, even a painfully tone-deaf letter insisting he'd changed. I ignored every one of them. There was nothing left to discuss. He had made his decisions, and I had finally made mine. Every now and then, I'd hear bits and pieces about his life through the grapevine. Apparently, he was struggling to find a job, and his reputation had taken a serious hit because of the fraud charges. He had even moved back in with his parents, still convinced he could charm or talk his way out of any situation. I didn't feel sorry for him. If anything, I felt relieved. He was no longer my responsibility. A month after everything was officially finalized, I stood by the window of my apartment, sipping my morning coffee as the city slowly came alive below. Sunlight streamed across the living room, catching the fresh coat of paint I'd chosen, my favorite shade of blue. The space didn't feel like a battleground anymore. It felt like home, peaceful, mine, and full of possibilities. I thought about everything that had brought me to this point. For years, I believed in the idea of marriage, of building a future with Ethan. I ignored that quiet voice inside me, the one that kept telling me something wasn't right, the one that tried to warn me that his charm was really just a cover for his selfishness. But now I understood something important. Walking away wasn't a failure. It was strength. That weekend, Lauren and I met for brunch, a new tradition we'd created ever since Ethan was officially out of my life. Over mimosas and waffles, she leaned in and asked, "So what's next for you?" I smiled, feeling a mix of calm and excitement that I hadn't felt in years. "Honestly, I'm just focusing on myself for now. Work is going great, and I've been thinking about taking a longer vacation. Maybe somewhere quiet, near the mountains." She raised her glass. "That's exactly what you should do. You deserve it." For the first time in a long time, every decision I made was completely my own. No compromise, no second guessing, just the freedom to shape my life on my own terms. Every now and then, mutual acquaintances would mention Ethan. Apparently, he was having a hard time getting back on his feet, jumping from one low-paying job to another while trying to pay back the money he owed. The designer suits, the flashy lifestyle, the expensive trips, they were all gone, replaced with a reality he never expected and definitely wasn't prepared for. I didn't spend much time thinking about it. His situation was the result of his own choices. I had made mine. The last time he tried to reach me was through a long, wandering email, an apology that felt more like self-pity than remorse. I skimmed the first few lines, then deleted it without replying. I didn't need closure from him. I had already given myself that. One evening, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, letting myself reflect on the entire journey. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the fight to reclaim what belonged to me. All of it had led to this quiet, steady moment. And even though the road had been painful, it had been worth it. I no longer felt bitterness or anger about what happened. If anything, I felt grateful. His betrayal forced me to see my own strength, to stop shrinking myself, and to finally put my needs first. I learned to trust my instincts, to value my independence, and to never again hand over control of my life to someone who didn't deserve it. As the city lights flickered in the distance, I lifted my glass toward the night sky. "Here's to me," I whispered. "Here's to starting over." And with that final toast, I closed the chapter on Ethan for good, ready to step into whatever came next.